Innovate, accelerate, move technology forward. The startup revolution is now.
For today, I have the team with me. My name is Gino, and I'm the product manager for Fastwire. I have Louis and Raf here with me, but I think it's best if I let them introduce themselves. Louis?
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Louis. I'm the co-founder of Fastwire, right? But prior to creating Fastwire, I was with FDev. I also spent 3 years, 3 to 4 years building up True Money Philippines, then about 4 years in Gcash prior to True Money. Um, then I have other corporate experience with Pfizer and Pepsi as well, right? How about you, Ref?
Hey guys, I'm Raf. I'm currently the project manager in Fastware, so I help with a bunch of things from product validation, just figuring out how to incorporate the company, daily ops, etc., etc. So I wear a bunch of different hats. Before this, though, I do have experience in fintech as well as in corporate. So I used to work for the largest SME lending company in the Philippines, which is quite a new company. I also used to work for one of the bigger global oil companies prior to moving into fintech. So yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. That's super great. Thanks for introducing yourself, guys. And if anyone hasn't caught it yet, we are the Fastwire team. You can check from my skirts. We got really cool shirts on. Showing the swag for the day. But you're probably all wondering, why are we talking about Fastwire? Well, Fastwire, here's what we're trying to do. We want to be easy to use, and we want to be built for people. We want to be a financial solution that really revolves around these two key points. But that still doesn't answer what Fastwire really is. But like with every great story with a hero and even a villain, it all starts with the origin story. And with origin story, I don't think there's a better person who can tell where we started than one of our co-founders, which is Louis. Louis, if you could walk us through about how the idea about Fastwire came about.
Yeah, I mean, the idea for Fastwire really started when I began my career in fintech, right, about 8 years ago. Um, and what I noticed was, as the business was scaling, right, all of our resources were really spent on scaling up and growing the customer facing side of the business. But very few of our resources were actually going into helping scale up our back office, right?
Mm,
So what was happening was, like, the tools and processes of our finance teams, our back office, you know, still remained very, very manual, right?
yep.
And we were fortunate enough in some cases where we had the budget to hire hordes of people, which I'll touch on a bit more later, right? To do the manual encoding or reconciliation and kind of validation of all of these manual transactions. But um, ultimately, like, we questioned, is like, why is this so hard, right? Like, why is this so difficult? Why do
Mm,
finance
mm,
teams not have the right tools to make their jobs easier? And um, yeah, but that's how Fastware started.
great. I just want to say, I find the word hoard such a super funny word. I keep thinking like the accounting team. I've got battle axes and swords and shields, just trying to get through all those invoices, which I think maybe is not that far from the truth. But like speaking of the accounting team, for Fastwire, I guess you're probably wondering, like, who are we doing this for? Like, who is our customer? Well, we've conducted a lot of interviews and we've talked with a lot of different businesses. I think over 100, which is something we'll talk about separately later. But based on our interviews, what we found is that when a business has grown big enough where it needs to dedicate like a person, like an actual person, just full time to manage their finances, they are the things that we're looking to find a solution for. These are the teams we find that need a solution like Fastwire. Alternatively, who is not our customer? Well, I would say businesses where the owner is the chief of everything. And I think I think there's probably a few people on the podcast listening right now saying that, yeah, I think that may be me because I started this thing 2 years ago and now I'm stuck selling ube cheese, pandesal every other weekend, which is great. No, I love snacks. I love every other snack that was launched 2 years ago. I bought pretty much everything. But the thing is, these businesses aren't at a point where they're large enough, so there's enough pain in their financial operations that it's become a blocker for them to grow. Like the owner does this pastime or part time. They do it on the weekends. They bake cookies on the weekend because why not? Because cookies are great. Everybody loves cookies, and might as well make a pretty penny out of it. But it's not something they need help with because everything is just manageable. So these are social sellers, side businesses. This isn't their primary income. It's just something fun to do. Maybe even a branch restaurant that has 7 kitchen employees, and instead of chief of everything, he's chef of everything. So he cooks everything and does everything else anyway. Um, but yeah, like these are the type of customers we're trying to look into. A business that has a person working financial operations, but that is too much. It's just all consuming and it just eats up 95% of their day. Um, but I guess the better question is, why do we even care? Why is this even personal to us? How do we even get with these problems? How do we even encounter them? And I'm going back to what I said earlier, where we talked to like 100 people, 100 businesses, and I don't think there's better people in our teams that can talk about this than Louis and Raf. Louis, if you could start us off, we'd love to hear um, some of the reasons why this even matters to us. Why is this so close and personal to us?
Yeah, at the previous fintech company I was working at, like we grew extremely fast. Like we went from 0 to 500 employees in 2 years. We went from 0 to 20,000 stores in about 3 years, right? And like at its peak, like our financial operations team was receiving about 4,000 bank deposits on a daily basis across 8 banks, right? And to handle the volume, like we had 15 people whose 8 to 5 day, right, from the time they come in to the time they leave was like check Viber, check Messenger, check email for the proof of deposits that are coming in, opening the corresponding bank portal, then try to find that exact transaction. Like corporate bank portals are unfortunately not the friendliest uh, like or well designed systems, right? So
Mm, mm,
we spent a lot of time and resources just doing this like critical task for the business, right? And each proof of deposit would take about 5 minutes to validate, right?
mm.
Individually, and one person could only do about 100 a day. So even though we had 15 people, um, they could only do about like 1,500, a day. But we were getting in. Well, we were about receive. We had about 4,000 coming in on a daily basis, right? And it just wasn't enough for to handle our daily volume. And it was really one of those things where we did a lot of things well, but this was a problem that we were never able to solve, right?
Oh no, no, I totally get that. That is too much checks. Honestly, at this point in time, like I've seen too many checks. The only checks I'm looking for are the blue checks. Twitter, Instagram, Elon, I know you can hear me. Get me verified. Those are the only checks we're looking at right now. We're trying to get rid of checks. Raf, how about you?
Yeah. The funny thing is, these problems appear in any company really. So it doesn't matter if you're like very old, like corporate that's been around for like many decades or a century, or if you're a new fintech, you always have some kind of problem when you go into financial operations and see if everything is working seamlessly. So I'll probably give you two examples from my previous companies as well. So the first one, as I mentioned, right, I worked in a very large oil corporate before. So I used to manage the P&L. So I was part of finance. I used to manage the P&L reporting of the retail sites of that entire company. So we had like about 1,000 sites or more spread throughout the Philippines, right? So the thing with finance is obviously the general manager is always going to be behind your back at the end of every month, trying to make sure that he can squeeze out as much money that he can report as income as soon as
Mm,
possible.
mhm,
The challenge there is if you manage so many retail sites like that and you have many different sources of revenues, it's very difficult to get all of that information on time. Just to give you a background, like we did have ERPs being used like SAP, but at the end of the day, if let's say you have a big, I don't know, multi-million peso piece of invoice that has to be scanned, documented, obtained from the buyer, it can take a lot of time. So what literally happens is you have the finance team trying to scrap all of those different invoices that are coming from different people. They have different forms because they have different businesses with different templates, right? Trying to get that done on time. The reality
mm.
is, people like me and the guys supporting me, like financial operations, would literally have to spend until like 5 a.m. The next morning in the office, just trying to get all of that information into one place. But the question is very simple. The question really is just, how much money have I earned, right?
Mm.
It's a very basic question, but there are so many processes that are manual that you need to go through before you can even do that. So I think it's pretty clear, right, when you talk about big corporates like that spread throughout many different countries. But like I said, even in my experience in fintech, so I used to work for an SME lending company here in the Philippines. So it's very progressive, right?
Mm.
They're really open to changing their business model to address what their clients need. But when it comes to actually executing their finance operations, there were still a lot of manual processes. So the way the business works is basically, so somebody needs to get a loan from our company because they need working capital, right, to be able to fund getting supplies, which they will then sell to somebody else, right? So it's very time sensitive because their customers could be somebody who needs to build like a huge building right now in Makati, let's say something like that. That is a huge deal. A lot of people are going to be clamoring for that one deal, but they need capital to be able to fund that. The problem is, for our company who's going to be providing them that capital, we still have a lot of manual requirements. So even before we give you out a loan, we'd request things like post-dated checks from you, right? So these kinds of payment methods or proofs of having revenue take a lot of time, right? So those people probably need financing within a span of a day or two. But now, because we need to get them to do these manual processes, like, okay, show me that you've actually written the check. Have you asked your boss to prepare the check? Have you booked Lala Move to deliver the check? Oh, you don't want to use Lala Move because it's quite risky, so let's do something else. All of those things extend the timeline from maybe just one day to becoming like a week or more, right? And by
Mm.
that time, you potentially lose that loan customer. So
Yes.
there are real implications to how quickly you can process these kinds of things. And
Mhm.
the key theme that you always notice is nobody's addressing that when it comes to finance operations, even these guys in fintech. So yeah, that's just those are probably two examples from me.
No, no, I totally get it. And I think what's happening is that everybody is just trying to find where the money is. Where is the money going to? And I'm going to quote the great Cuba Gooding Jr. from the movie Jerry Maguire. And Raph said it, just show. It's 4 words, everyone. Show me the money. That's what accounting team's trying to do. They just want to show you the money. Where is the money? And I think that's a very strong pain point, really a frustration for a lot of the operations that has to happen just to get these reports done right. Um, per, on my side, like I used to work for one of the fastest growing HR tech companies in the Philippines. And because we were fast growing, we had a lot of customers coming in. But here's the thing, we worked on really cutting edge tech in terms of recruitment and job matching. But one thing we did do very old school was billing our customers and getting paid. So we would have physical invoices that get sent to the customers, obviously, so that we can request payment because a lot of these companies would be very big as well. So we'd have couriers go to these offices to give them an invoice. And then the funny thing is, we'd have to send them back just so we could get the checks over. Um, the big challenge, though, was that there was this delay from the back and forth, which I would say was just aggravated by what happened 2 years ago, because now we had a lot of customers that we had to send invoices to and we had to get the checks to. But I don't think anybody wanted to go outside. There just wasn't any way to physically hand you the money and show you the money and get it over there. And with business already struggling, this just made it even harder to make things work. So I know about this very closely and I've experienced it firsthand. But the question is, even if it is personal to us, what makes financial operations and their pain points an important problem to solve? Louis, we'd love to get your insights on this.
Yeah. According to the 2022 FinTech Philippines report, there's 222 fintech companies, right, registered in the Philippines. There are about 51 payment companies. There's a lot of lending, a lot of wallets and digital banks, right? Like there's really so much fintech, right? It's really one of the most mature tech industries in the Philippines, but there's not one company that's trying to help finance teams, right? So everyone is trying to scale, but everything is like Wizard of Oz, right? Where everything is shiny outside, but the finance teams are using pen and paper, and it's hamsters and wheels, really making things run internally. And that's what we want to solve, right? And we want to help we want to help businesses, right, and their finance teams scale up using software instead of headcount, right? And when we looked, outside of the Philippines, we feel that the opportunity is massive, like in Southeast Asia, where millions of businesses, right, could potentially could use a product like Fastwire to make their business run more efficiently.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I just had this weird mental image of the finance teams every Friday or end of month just clicking their heels and saying, "There's no place like home. There's no place like home. I just want to go home. I just want this to end. There's just so much paperwork. There's so much paperwork." Um, One person that we talked to in financial operations says, there's so much fintech out there, but there isn't any FinOps. And we're like, are you being serious? Yeah, yeah. It's not even FinOps at this point. We just call it FinOops. I'm like, I kind of like that. I kind of like that. I will bring that back to marketing. That's what I'll do. It's so interesting though that even with all this tech, like, how have teams really been trying to move forward with this problem? How are they even dealing it? Raf, I'd say, is one of the leaders in our team that's really gotten to the heart of this. Raf, if you could share your insight with how these problems have always been there, but like how have other teams been trying to solve it? How are they wizarding their way through every compliance check and every financial report they had to do?
Yeah, sure. So I think two things, right? Like the first question, which Louis answered bit a bit, is how do the internal finance teams address this? The second one is, I think, the more interesting one. What are the startups that do exist right now do to try and address the problem? So internally, I think it's quite clear, right? So people have had the habit within their businesses of just throwing additional headcount whenever they
Mm-hmm.
find that okay, finance isn't moving fast enough, or they feel like the finance people are actually getting overburdened. It's kind of the culture like okay, if we need something done in finance, let's just add more people there. It's just not really sustainable, like from a cash flow perspective, right? It's quite expensive, and it's also not good for the people being hired anyway. When you just
Mm,
expect to add another headcount once they,
yep.
basically burn out, right? Which is a
Yep.
nice thing, especially coming from there. The second question, though, is like, what are other existing startups or fintechs doing to try and address this? Like Louis said, it's very interesting to see what developments have happened in spaces like collections and payments, as well as cloud software. There are a lot of guys doing great work here. I think the difference though is in Fastwire, we really try to understand like what does financial operations mean. Because if you look at what other people are doing, typically they just focus on a specific aspect. So let's
Yep.
say different parts of the financial operations process include collections and receivables. You then have disbursements, maybe a bit of payroll. You then have to manage all the taxation and then accounting and reporting overlaid underneath, right? So finance operations is huge, right?
Mm,
So typically, what companies do is they focus on a specific part of that. So, for example, in collections and receivables, there are a ton of payment gateways in each of the Southeast Asian countries trying to make sure it's easier to send and collect payments, right? Which is
yes.
great. What
Yep.
we have found though is that they still haven't been able to address parts before actual collections and after collections itself. So in Fastwire, for example, what we try to do then is ask, okay, so payment gateways are trying to solve the collection side, but what happens before that? And what we found is that there are still no all-encompassing and easy-to-use tools that let you record the collectibles you have from clients, know when to collect from them, how much. There is also no platform that then allows you to create those invoices and then just immediately send them to all of your clients. So there's really no one solution for that yet. And again, even after collections, after the payment gateways do their job, when it comes to reconciliation, meaning a company just has one set of books, right? So I don't really care
Mm-hmm.
where the money comes from. So I just need to see in my books one report saying, okay, the client has actually paid already. The challenge is there's also no solution for reconciliation as of the moment, right? So that's one of the things we get to do in Fastwire when we ask, okay, broad financial operations perspective, what other things are we not addressing right now? Another example outside of like collections is there are so many great cloud accounting software right now, like TurboTax, Zero, QuickBooks, all these amazing tools, and they do an excellent job when it comes to making the experience of accountants and finance professionals much more digitized. Okay. The challenge we found though is that because it's very finance centric, there are a few things or blind spots that you may encounter when trying to solve with that frame of mind. For example, if you really focus on catering to finance professionals, it'll probably be harder to have that product be used by somebody who isn't actually a CPA, who hasn't had like units of finance back in college. So there's that learning gap there. Whereas if you take a step back and look from a more generic finance operations perspective, you then get to have certain realizations like, well, if you think about it, all of the transactions that have to be recorded on a debit and credit system, double entry system accounting, are just triggered by business transactions, right? So why can't we just have a system where a salesperson, somebody who isn't in finance, just creates an invoice, generates a sale, and then that already does the accounting for them. They don't need to be an actual accountant to understand how to use the system. So those are the kinds of perspective that we're happy to have seen because we've taken that additional step back to view the process more broadly.
Got it. Got it. Um, Speaking of viewing these processes, the way we're trying to change things up, how we're trying to create a different experience with Fastwire is that, well, if you haven't noticed, we're just all about interviews. Like, if we could, we just do interviews all day, every day. It's just a thing we do now. But on top of that, we have another layer on how we're crafting these solutions. We've developed a partnership model where we invite potential customers to be very early adopters, where they'll have first access and be a voice on how we craft our solutions. Speaking of voices, it's a program we've called the Voice of the Customer. And speaking of the voice of the customer, we have a few stories here about how poor financial operations have really made an impact or affected businesses. If you could start us off with some of the war stories you've heard, Louis, that'll be super great.
Yeah, I mean, like like we mentioned earlier, we spend a lot of time speaking with customers, right? I think with Fastwire, like I'm not a finance person, right? So the only way that we would understand their perspective is by really spending time with them, right? So we're going to share a few stories from interviews that we've done from the
Mm.
past few months, right, in working with Fastwire. So um, this is a quote from a partner at one of the well-known law firms in the country that works with tech companies, right? I don't want to say who. I don't want to get sued, but he estimates that like he loses about 10 million pesos a year because his associate lawyers um, do a poor job tracking the billable hours that they work for their clients, right? Um, and there are tools out there, but he said that the tools that do exist are difficult to use. So the lawyers, resort to notebooks, they resort to Excel, they resort to like Google Notepad, right? It's whatever they would use just to make it more convenient, right? But he estimates that, like, hey, if we don't make it easier, how can I expect a lawyer to remember that he spent 30 minutes working on a client, you know, 20 days ago, right?
Mm.
And even for himself, like for this partner, uh, he spends so much time. Like he spends personally 8 hours a month just recording, uh, the work that he's done for clients, so he can build them, right? So you could ask, okay, that's an attendance system, but the
Mm.
way finance operations is not a specific task, right? It's knowing who owes you and what they owe you is part of the end-to-end workflow that like finance teams have to deal with, right? So again, this is a one example, right? So I'll share another, right?
Hey, Louis, low key though, if I find the 10 million, is there like a finder's fee? Like, how does that? Maybe we can slide
Yeah,
in,
man.
help you
Maybe he can pay us, the 10% of what he's
there. I'd
of
be
his
super fine with
leakage.
that. I'll take five. I'll take five.
Yeah.
I'll take five.
Yeah, yeah. We'll share another story, right? Yeah, could you skip to the next slide, Gino?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you know, we also spoke with a general manager that oversees like a condo property of 2,000 units. So it's pretty sizable, right? And like she was sharing that the tenants, assume that there's corruption within the admin office because it takes about 3 months for their payments to reflect on their accounts, right? But she said like the reality is like you know the 2 to 3 people in the admin office, they just can't manage through all of the paperwork and all of the proof of the deposits that are being submitted 2,000 times a month, every month. And shit, there's no corruption. It's just we're drowning in paperwork, right? And that's why it takes so long for them to get through their monthly backlog. Right?
I like how they just step back and resorted to a telenovela outcome. It's probably corruption. It's
It's
Yeah, I
very
mean,
corrupt.
that's
It's
crazy,
yeah, I mean,
right?
but if you're a resident, right, you're gonna be like, like I paid you already. Why does it take 3 months?
Yeah.
It's so simple, but
That is
Yeah.
the
true.
the residents don't see that they're sitting on stacks and stacks of receipts,
Mm,
Viber chats, and
Yeah.
however they're submitting proof of payment. So it's tough for them, right? It's
Yeah,
yeah, no,
especially
totally
with
getting
all the
that.
Viber groups you have these days, right? Like especially since the pandemic, I know there are a lot of like villages. They have their own Viber chats. They fight with each other. So it's not gonna be a great image if you want to like market your property as a premium. Yeah.
Homeowner Viber chat coming in extra
Yeah,
spicy
that's crazy.
Thursday on a Thursday at 2. Did you know? Did you know there's corruption? Like, oh, I just woke up from my siesta. What are you talking about? But okay, but sorry to interrupt. Back to you, Louis. Back to
Yeah, yeah. Another example is we're actually working with one of the largest Taekwondo schools, right, in the Philippines, where
you. Mm,
their cash flow is directly tied to the attendance that they take for their students, right?
mm,
And the way that they earn is they charge for every session that these students, or for every class that the students take, right? So if they can't do attendance efficiently and easily, then convert that attendance sheets or those attendance sheets into payment requests. It
mm,
directly impacts like how much money that they can use to operate, right? So
mhm,
one of the so like for them, it's if they can't send invoices on time, that means that they're not getting their money on time, right? So like
mm.
a similar story to this is we were speaking with the owner of a football club, right, where she said
Yes.
that they finally got the time to sit down and go through their backlog of attendance sheets, right?
Yep.
And they discovered that one family owes them 67,000 pesos worth of like dues, right? Which is a lot, right? Like imagine how many months would have passed already, right? For one family to accrue 67,000 pesos worth of like sessions or classes, right? So it's a lot. And the owner was sharing is like, hey Louis, like nahihiya sila, right?
Mm,
To
mm.
ask the family, it's like, hey, like, can you pay us the 67,000 pesos when it's really, it's not on purpose, but it's an oversight from the football club because it's such a hassle for them to convert their attendance sheets into payment requests, right? So,
How do you how do you even say that super casual, like over dinner? Oh yeah, love the pasta from last week. By the way, you owe me 67K. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Let me
yeah, yeah. I mean, that was a
give me the
legitimate
money
concern
now.
for her. She's like,
Just give me the money now.
what if they don't have the
I can't.
67,000 pesos right now, right? Um,
Who
but
who does?
yeah, I mean, that's
Like,
that's it.
I feel like
It puts both the business and the customer in a tough situation, diba?
yeah, no, no. If that ever happens, Louis, and I say, oh Louis, by the way, you owe me 67K, and just pull it out of your wallet. 10 out of 10 times, just be sure. I'm telling you right now, I'm reporting you to someone. Like, oh, this guy is suspicious. 67K in his wallet. Okay. Oh, it looks like we got one more. We got one
Yeah,
more.
yeah, yeah. One more, right? So again, yeah, we'll touch on this later. There was a time where Raf and I really spent weeks just talking, reaching out to lawyers. But this guy, he charges his clients 20,000 pesos per hour, right? Which makes you
An
question
hour?
kind of, yeah, yeah, your career and your job and what you're doing with your life. But
I made
um,
some bad decisions. It looks like I made some
exactly,
poor,
man.
poorly made. Huh?
Here we're trying to build software, and this guy is earning 20,000 pesos per hour. So,
Before
um,
merienda, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I could pay for those football classes. I could pay
yeah.
for them. Yeah.
But and he was sharing that
Yikes.
personally, right? So he's a partner at a law firm, and he personally spends 8 hours a month following up his clients for their payments, right? He has an accounting team that sends the invoices and payment requests, but they don't act, until they get an email from him. And that's tangible money lost every month, um, because he has to do, like, these individual follow-ups, right? So that's 160,000 pesos that he's losing, where he's not the only partner in the law firm, right? So the whole firm in itself is probably losing more just from client follow-up. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is wild. And I'm talking about the 20K, man. Like, is that streamer money? I'm looking like it looks like streamer money. Oh my God, 20,000. But yeah, like these are very real stories from customers, and like that's the space we're really trying to solve. But Louis, what gives you confidence in solving problems in financial operations? Uh,
I mean, for us, I'll say it again. We sat down with over 100 different businesses at this point, right?
yeah,
Businesses of different sizes, industries, right? And um, there's been more than a few times where a customer will tell us, like, we will pay you if you build this, right? And to us, that is probably the strongest signal that
I like that. I like it.
there's a problem for them, right? So, like, whenever we whenever a customer, like, tells us that they will pay us, right, for this imaginary software that we have yet to build, um, that's signal for us, to go
Sounding
dive
like
deeper
every
in.
startup ever.
That tells us to dive deeper into that segment, and
Yes, yes.
um, like, see how many other businesses share the same problem, and also for ourselves, like, understand more about the problem, right? And if we find that, hey, there are many businesses just like this,
Yep.
what we do is we recruit them, into a co-building program, right? Before even we write one line of code, um, we enter we sign up at least 10 businesses into this co-building program, um, and and they go through that journey of creating that solution, right? And again, when customers tell you that they're willing to pay you
Yep.
to solve this problem, like, that's what gives us confidence, right?
Yep. No, I get it. It's like that movie. If you build it, they will pay. No, no, I was kidding. They will pay.
Let's feel the dreams.
Let's
Not
feel
quite the
that.
exact quote, but
It feels super close. This is a field of dreams anyway. It's tech. Um, but like, how are you? So personally, I'm super curious. Like, how you even get 100 people to talk to you? How do you get people to start talking to you, Rap? Like, what's the what are the magic words? You find that brass lamp in the middle of the road. Give me 100 people who
Yeah.
will take my customer interviews.
Yeah, so the thing is, neither I or Louis are like salespeople. So it wasn't like a pretty journey when we were like going through this. We really had no idea what we were doing, right? But you have to talk to people, right? So we started with friends, folks we knew from our old companies before, but that network eventually runs out, right? And then when you have to select a specific segment you want to talk to, you're really gonna have to just like do cold calls and talk to people you've never spoken to, and it takes a lot of like I guess confidence to pull that off well. And we didn't pull it off well during our first few attempts. In fact, our
Mm,
first approaches were we tried to like really pitch the platform, and like just pretend that we were salespeople and be confident and all. I'm not sure how much of the insecurity showed through really. But what we initially tried to do was we actually started speaking to lawyers like Louis said, right? The reason being, when we were speaking to our personal friends, some of them were lawyers. They noticed that there were a lot of stuff that we could digitize for them, right? So the next step was getting a list of all those lawyers. So we just used a bunch of tools like Phantom Buster and other free trials that we could maximize online to like get a list of like all of the law firms with their contact numbers and addresses into one list, right? So the approach was pretty simple. We would just, pick up the phone, do cold calls, and hope to God that somebody actually answers us and speaks with us, right? But the reality
Yep.
was, we kept, calling these offices. We keep just hitting a wall with the secretaries or EAs of the lawyers, and there was literally just one single response from each of these EAs or secretaries. They will always say,
Mm,
all of the lawyers are working from home. I'm not sure
mm.
when they're going to be back. I am pretty certain that that's an industry standard response from law firms when they don't want to talk to the client.
They're
They're
being
not gonna.
nice. They're being
Yeah,
polite.
yeah, yeah. But it was literally the only response we were getting. It was very funny. So we tried different approaches, right? So we went back to the drawing board and said, nobody really wants to talk to us. Are there other channels that we could use? So we tried other stuff. Eventually, we used LinkedIn, and it pretty much worked out well because we found that because lawyers really are obviously professionals, they like to have really strong accounts where you can contact them and connect with them on LinkedIn. So that really worked well. But more importantly, what we found was it doesn't really, it's not really going to work if you're going to try to pitch something immediately.
Yep.
Um, Whenever you sales talk somebody, they know you're sales talking them, right? They know you're trying to sell something to them, and the first thing that they're gonna think of is, okay, how am I gonna tell him no, right? It's like that random call you get from your credit card company saying, oh, do you want to offer you insurance now, right? You just tell them you're in a meeting, something like that.
Yep.
So the way we changed things up was instead of pitching what we already built, we just came in like this. We told them, hey, I'm Rafa, I'm Louis. I'm part of this startup where we're trying to solve a lot of problems when it comes to finance operations. And we think you might have these problems too because we've spoken to so many people. It seems like everybody's experiencing this. Do you have 15 minutes this week whenever you're free to talk to us? We literally just want to hear your opinion and hear if you have the same pains. And we stop there. No sales talk whatsoever. We don't even tell them that we have an MVP or a team already behind us. But
Yep.
that seems to work because it seems more natural for those guys. It doesn't force them to have to think about how they say no. And at the end of the day, if it's a real problem to them, we now become like their sounding board to share all of their pains and ideas. So yeah, we're a shoulder to cry on for free after that. But yeah, it's worked so far. We've been doing it for even the other segments now, and it's been pretty good. We get the insights we need. We know what to build, and it's pretty straightforward when you do it that way. Um, so yeah, there's for me. Louis, you might want to share your experiences as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like Raf said, right? It's asking people for interviews is tough because everyone values their time, and so we really started with like going through your Facebook friends and trying to think what jobs do these people have, what companies do they own. It's going through your contact list, right? I think our first 40 interviews were really people within our network, right? So you just kind of really have to like kind of get over that fear of, oh, nakakahiya, right? And just
Yep.
ask, right? But
Mhm.
like Raf said, like after we spoke through to a few lawyer friends, we're like, hey, this problem keeps coming up, right? About
Yep.
lawyers having a tough time tracking billable hours. We knew that we needed to get more insights, right? Because you don't really want to make decisions when your sample size is very small, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so Raf and I think it was like May or June, where we spent like 2, 3 weeks like trying to talk to lawyers, right? And like, what's the best way to talk to lawyers, right? We generated at first like we generated a list of 200 law firms, and we cold called all 200, like nothing. It's like zero. It was so painful. We tried
Mm,
emailing, nothing, right?
mm,
Even again, like we tried on LinkedIn first, where hey, uh, we built this awesome software. It's going to help you out. Please talk to me, right? But
please talk to
it
me.
didn't work, right? So like what we ended up doing was like, oh, I guess like the real lesson is like spiels matter, right? And what we
Yes.
realized was the less salesy our approach was, the better it worked, right? So we became very specific. It's like, hey, we understand that you work for a law firm. We're trying to understand more about this problem. Um, can you give us your opinion, right? We just love to chat with you about this problem for 15, 30 minutes. Um, and that approach seemed to work, right? And at this point, actually, we haven't paid, right, for any of our interviews, which is in the past, like when I was building other products, you're always like, oh, I have to have incentives for people to get to speak with me. And um, and that's one of the biggest learnings, actually, like with when we were doing this for Fastwire, was if people are happy to talk about their problems, and they will do it for free, right?
Mhm.
As long as that problem was really meaningful for them, right? Or I guess painful enough.
That's so true. That's so true. I wonder if you caught that too, Louis. You notice how Raph said, "Oh, you just say I'm in a meeting, so he doesn't need to talk to you." So is it every time we ping him, like Raph, we need a consult? Oh, I'm in a meeting. Oh, he doesn't want to talk to us. He he's just ignoring us. That's the play. That's the play. I figured it out. With that being said, um, with all these interviews, how would you describe our approach, Louis?
Um, well, I think we have to cut. I think we skipped a slide.
Yeah, that's for me dapat yung ano, other people's approach to validation. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, ano. Pass it on to me muna, Gino, yung other people's approach. That's mine.
Oh
Yeah.
no. Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, we'll just cut that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. 3, 2, 1 ka, Gino.
Okay. So, how do you see other people's approach to validation, Raf? Like, what are the what are the forms that you're seeing on how other teams are trying to do this?
Yeah, I think people fall into a spectrum when they, build their own startup. The spectrum is between, are you very solutions oriented, or are you very problem validation oriented when it comes to defining what you need to build, right? So we in Fastwire, we really like the very heavy problem validation approach. So we're sure about our
Yep.
product market fit. But a
Hmm.
lot of other people, especially the ones who just had their first startup, they start with a solutions-based approach, which is not necessarily wrong, but there are some challenges when you use that. So I'll give you an example. There's a startup we know. They're from another country in Southeast Asia. You have a very passionate founder, right? So the founder, he wanted to build a mental health app where you could crowdsource support from other people who may have experienced the same mental health issues as yourself. The problem was
Hmm.
quite clear on a broad basis. In their country, it was still kind of taboo to talk about what do you call this, mental health. Getting professional mental help would be quite expensive, right? So there was a high level need. You already figured that out. But this was basically a passion project of the founder, which he didn't have first-hand experience with. He actually came from real estate, but he just found the heart to help other people, which is fantastic. Um, the approach he did take, though, was once he defined that problem statement, he immediately set out building his own company, and that meant throwing many thousands of dollars into hiring the best engineering team in the country, getting that engineering team to start building their MVP. And in fact, they have
Hmm.
hyper fast sprints. Like every single week, they would have new features that they would internally think of and then release, and then test, but just internally. So the thing that happened was after a year or so, when they started reaching out to people who might use it, maybe hospitals who want to be part of the ecosystem, nobody actually wanted to talk to them at that point. Again, because it was more of a sales pitch approach that they were doing. But as importantly, they started building the product first before really addressing the detailed problems and the process flow that everybody goes through when they try to get mental health, right? So there wasn't sufficient product market fit, at least in that iteration of the product.
Hmm.
So that can be some of the kinds of pitfalls you get. So after a year, you've spent so many thousands of dollars on costs, and now he's basically back in the drawing board. It's a bit of an existential crisis, really, because you're trying to figure out, okay, is this really something that's worth doing? Because people aren't biting, or is it just we need to amend the way we're executing the product? So that's one approach. Obviously, it probably works for some other people. But there is that kind of challenge there. So as I
Mm.
mentioned in Fastwire, we really try to do a lot of problem validation first. Actually, Louis, maybe you want to talk about that because I know you really spearhead instilling that culture, not just in product, but in sales and everybody who interfaces with the client in Fastwire.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like the last fintech company I worked for, it's that's really like what drilled into my head that a lot of the products I'm building is are not for me. Like I'm not the customer, right? And it really showed that the more time I spent with customers, the more that they ended up using our service, right? Just because you could really like, imagine how they would use it, where they would use
Mm.
it, and actually that's
Yeah.
why again the recurring theme of this, I guess, talk is like, hey, we interview a lot, right? And our ultimate goal is like we believe that UX, right, like should really be at the heart of the experience, right? Like we want to create a product for business owners and finance teams that's like easy and intuitive to use as the spreadsheets that they're used to, right? But with a comprehensive set of features that will enable their businesses to get financial operations and reporting done fast and easily, right? And I guess like the ultimate idea here is we want to build something that encompasses powerful ERP and accounting features like disbursements, integration into other systems, uh, collections later on, right? But at the heart and the center is like good design and good UX. Right? It's something that we want to create something that's very accessible, right? And where it's not super finance professional focused.
Hmm. Hmm. And I guess that speaks about really our philosophy around how we build and how we're engaging with our customers. We we mentioned this very early. We touched on it during the show. We've developed a co-building program with the customers. And what it is like there's 10 customers for each co-building cohort who have built a partnership with us. They've committed to giving access to interview time, on-site visits, talk about the templates they use, feedback on our designs, and even testing. And in return, we provide uh, a really attractive offering for the start of their subscriptions. Um, so we meet with the one customer at least each week, and we do an exercise called a day in a life. We try to do what our customers are doing and see if we go crazy, basically. And we write down all the parts where we go crazy. And I'm going to share a story from this week where I was in one of the football pitches for the football program that Louis talked about earlier. And we were trying to help them make sense of which of the kids had already paid their classes. And it was dependent on whether they made it to the class or not. And I was in a pitch, and probably the first time I've touched grass in like 3 years. Mind-boggling, I know. But yeah, this
Yeah, and the
fitness
that
doesn't come. Thank you, Louis. This fitness doesn't come from like sitting around. Like I got to work on this. You got to work on this. But yeah, so it was the large. It was a very large pitch, obviously football field, and they were like 65 to 70 kids running around, and these were not 15, 16, 17-year old kids. These were 5 years, 6 years, 8, 11 years old. So they don't respect anything. You don't let them follow the rules. They are the rules. They just run
they
around and
don't care
scream.
about attendance, right?
They don't care. They don't care about. They don't care about attendance. They don't care about you. They don't care about anything. They just want to run around because it's a field and it's freedom. And it's fun. But the 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 fun part about it is that as one of the people running the program, you have to find out who attended the class, and they're not gonna go to you and say, "Oh, I'm present." They're not gonna raise their hand. You need to walk around the field. You need to look at kids' jerseys. You need to look at the kids' faces if they don't have names on the jerseys, because not all the jerseys have names. And not everyone would wear the jersey. Maybe a kid forgot their jersey because they're kids. They don't care about the rules. So we walked around for a good 15 to 20 minutes just filling out a sheet of paper and marking it with checks. And I said, yep, that's it. I'm done. That was good work, everyone. That wasn't as challenging as I thought it would be. And they said, that was just the start. We have to build them now. And I'm like, yeah, should be easy, right? Just send them a bill. And they showed me a Viber chat that had 40 parents in it. And in the middle of conversations about what to wear, should a mom bring oranges? Should a mom bring fried chicken next time? Is where they would post if they made payments. So I don't know if you've been in a group chat with a lot of moms, but it's like a bazillion messages every other hour. So it's in between receipts, in between talking about chicken, in between talking about the ice candy that wasn't as sweet last week. I'm like, how does this make any sense? And the person just looked at me with the deadest set of eyes I've ever seen and said, "You don't." I'm like, "Oh my god, oh my god." It's insanity. But the thing is, with these conversations and with trying this out, you don't just know the story, you feel the emotion. And the emotion, I would say, is the strongest motivator for anything. It's definitely the strongest motivator for change for me if I ever have to do that again, God knows what. So in listening to these problems, being in the experience, it helps us focus on these emotions that we want to make better. Like really, really, really better. We want to create a delightful experience. And a delightful experience means that when I go use something, it is actively solving what we're trying to do. And it just opens up like a large window into the future of what can happen. And I think Louis, you'd be the best person to let us know, like, what is the future for Fastwire?
I mean, like we envision like Fastwire, right, to be the de facto platform of choice for business owners and whoever heads their finance team, right? In the Philippines, in Southeast Asia, to manage the day-to-day finances of their businesses, right? And what we want to do is to make uh, complex and cumbersome like operations and make them like really simple, and design it with the best possible user experience, right? Like we really want Fastwire to be synonymous with humanizing finance and making financial operations easy and fast, right? That's the ultimate goal for us.
No, that is definitely it. If we were going to do a TLDR for Fastwire, we want to make accounting easy and fast for everybody. And the way we're doing that is by feeling the emotion and getting to the heart of what our customers are feeling, and then using that as our guide, as our North Star, as we go on this journey together to create a wonderful experience so that anybody who uses Fastwire gets to feel that experience and just get away from that pain of trying to make sense and finding the money. Show me the money. I think those are four great words we'd like to leave with you today. Um, and I think that is it. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear them. But before we go, I'd like to invite Louis and Raf. Do you have any final words from the team?
Yeah. If anyone out there can really relate to the problem we're trying to solve, and you have a business or you work in a startup, right, or you work in some sort of company that where the finance team has frustrations, like we'd love to speak with you, right? Like we just want the 15-30 minutes of your time and tell us, what's not so great about your day-to-day work, right? And it helps us make our product better.
Yeah. For me, the team continues to grow. If you listen to the entire presentation, you found this very interesting and you like the challenge. We understand it's a challenge. It's a very big goal that we have. Give us a call. We're always looking for more people who are really driven to work with us. So we'd be more than happy to chat with you.
Yep. Um, so like they said, you got any questions? You got any stories? Anything feels familiar to you? You feel this pain? We want to talk to you. You feel passionate about it? It is something experienced too. We'd love to hear from you. If you can see the slide now, we got a QR code. You can scan that. Visit our website. We've also put our emails there so you can reach us out. You want to talk to Fastwire, you want to learn more, you want to have a fast time with the fast guys from Fastwire. By the way, I don't know if we talked about it. The reason we call it Fast Times is because of the motto, when you're having a good time, time flies. And I hope this hour went by really fast and you had a great time with us today. We're super thankful you joined us for today's show. So let us know anytime you want to get connected. We'll help you find that money. You got 10 million you want to find? I'll take that finder's fee. Louis, Ralph, we'll take it. We'll do it. Just hit us up. You know where to find us. You got the QR code, you got the email. Thank you so much for listening. This is Gino, and
This is Louis.
Rap signing off. Thanks, guys.
See you
Bye.
guys.
thanks,
Bye, everyone.
us
See ya.
guys from Fastwire. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.